I'm Esther Boykin, a licensed marriage and family therapist, CEO at Group Therapy Associates. I'm an author, writer, but tonight I am mostly want to welcome you to Kitchen Conversations. This is my monthly Google chat where we talk about all kinds of things, relationships, life, love, parenting, whatever's on your mind. And today I'm going to talk mostly about my role as a couples therapist. It's probably the one thing I do that I get the most questions about, either what's my expert opinion or how can I help people's problems. I get all kinds of fun. Thought today would be a great time for me to just talk a little bit about what does it mean to be a couples therapist, what's it like going to couples therapy, and give you guys just some insider tips on the whole therapy process, especially when it involves a couple or a relationship. So I am super excited to have viewers and commenters. I've got a couple of questions from people who could not make the chat live, so I will get to those. And I think one of the places I really want to start, because I'm always excited when I see celebrities or popular people, sort of the cool kids are going to therapy. So I love when I can find a really good article where people are talking about the benefits and offering a fresh perspective. So I was really excited. About a week ago, there was an article in People magazine. Dax Shepard and Kristen Bell, who are married. I think they have 2 kids. Besides being a super cute couple, they're just like adorable together. And I think they had some cell phone commercials that were very cute. They were very open about the role couples therapy plays in their marriage and really offered what I think could be a fresh perspective. And so later on, I'll share a link. There's a little video clip of Dax Shepard. If you aren't familiar with Dax Shepard and Kristen Bell, they're both actors in a variety of things. I think right now Dax Shepard is on Parenthood, and I am absolutely obsessed with Kristen Bell on the Showtime TV show House of Lies with Don Cheadle. It's a great show if you're into that kind of thing. But what they both really were able to say was that they started therapy as a couple at the beginning. In fact, before they even got engaged, before they got married, they had decided to work on this. And I really one of the things that he shares in his interview is that essentially they were dating and were both up for roles in the same movie. And the producer, who happened to be a friend, came to him and was basically like, I'm not going to cast 2 people who are dating. Presumably because he didn't want to deal with the drama that would ensue if they broke up. And Dax Shepard promised this friend, this producer, whatever happens, no matter what happens, I will not break up with her. I will stay with her. And he sort of reflected, he got to the end of the movie and shooting and was sort of like, got back to real life and realized, like, had I not made that promise to my friend, I probably would have broken up with her. But I didn't. And then started to think like, wow, but I want to stay with her and I want to figure out how to make this work for a really long time, which is how they really ended up considering the idea of couples therapy on the front end. But what I love most is, his friend pointed something out, which I often point out for couples, and I think sometimes gets couples into trouble at the beginning, which is, he got to the end of the movie and said to his friend, now we have to figure out how to be together in real life. And his friend said, that is real life. Making the commitment, saying to somebody, I will not break up with you. No matter what happens, we're going to work through it and I'm not going to leave. That's real life. That's a real relationship. That's a real commitment. And I think often what happens over the course of dating and engagement and weddings is that we make these commitments sort of in these short-term events or for milestones and don't realize that every time you get up and say, I'm with you, we're together, I love you, I'm not leaving, just if we have a fight, if you say something I don't like, we will figure out how to get through it. That is the commitment of being in a relationship. Not for engagement, not for a short period of time, but over the long haul. It isn't sort of this one magic wand that gets waved. It's an ongoing commitment to working together to figure out what the next phase of life looks like and how do you do it together. And for me, as a couples therapist, that's what I love to do. And I think that's really the magic. If there's any magic in couples therapy, that's what it is. It is really having somebody else to help you stay accountable to that commitment and to help you navigate the waters when that commitment gets and so, which sort of eases us into the question I get all the time, which is really, how do you listen to people's problems? And obviously, as a therapist, my job is about listening. It is about being present and hearing people talk about what's difficult or what's hard. And sometimes it's venting and complaining. Sometimes it's talking about what was sad or working through decisions. But my job is much more than listening. I think if my job was only to listen to people talk about problems, then it probably would become exhausting and I would be sick of it and I would be doing something else. I don't know what that is. But thankfully, that isn't just the whole job. I think the job as a couples therapist is to do more than just listen. It's to be a witness to some of what happens in a relationship. And I don't mean that in sort of some sort of, law and order, CSI kind of witness, like witnessing, the crimes that are happening in a relationship, but a witness to the process, to provide this third perspective that is outside of the emotional engagement of what's happening between you and your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and really kind of be able to step on the sidelines and say, I can see it from everyone's perspective. I've got this sort of like amazing vantage point where I get to say, I think this is what you're trying to express, but the way you're saying it, it's really difficult for your husband to hear that, or for the husband to sort of create some safe space to say, well, what do you think about what, your wife or your girlfriend's just said? Can you understand that? Can you connect with each other? I always say, my job is to listen to the undercurrent. The top current is, she's always nagging me about the cat litter, he never helps around the house, or I can't believe he said this, or she called me a name. That's sort of that top level listening. And I get to sit and really listen and ultimately help couples hear the undercurrent of all of those arguments. Very rarely are we arguing about the thing that we are expressing in words. I have a favorite video where, it's this woman and she's got a nail in her head and she's saying, and it's not about the nail. Like, she just wants her husband to just listen and empathize and be here with me and tell me how terrible it is that, I have this throbbing headache. And yes, there's always room for fixing. Sometimes we need to solve problems. But so often what happens in a relationship is that we stop really hearing what our partner's trying to express. And we are defensive, or we get into these battles of who's right and who's wrong. We get triggered. All of our kind of childhood things start to come up, and our feelings around being told what to do, or being controlled, or not feeling connected, or being afraid of being abandoned. All of that stuff gets in the way of really kind of understanding each other over time. And couples therapy is just a really good place to sort that out, to have somebody help you to clear the air and discover better solutions for the way you're communicating with each other. So that's a little bit, that's kind of the answer. Like, how do I do what I do and not get burnt out? It's that it's much more than just listening for problems. And really, I sort of tune my ear to listen for solutions. I think that's really the work of any good couples therapist. So along those lines, I had an article that I wrote for, you'll have to bear with me with the kind of like wandering eye because I want to take a look at it. But I have an article that I wrote for Paul Brunson's blog, probably about a year ago, actually, but it was sort of the things I wish people knew about couples therapy, sort of the myths about couples therapy. And one of the things that, hold on, tech issues. There we go. Or actually, I think it was just tech issues on my part. You probably could see me the whole time. So one of the myths I talk about in the article, and I guess I should say side note, all the things that I'm mentioning, so the interview with Dax Shepard and the video with the woman with their nail in the head and this article that I wrote for Paul Brunson's site, these are all things that if you visit my website, estherboykin.com/kitchen conversations, I will have links to all of those later tonight. So if you're watching the replay or you're watching it now, but you want to be able to follow up with some of the things that I'm talking about, if you go back to that website, again, it's estherboykin.com/kitchens. There will be links to all of the articles that I mentioned, just so that you can take a look at them for yourself. So the article I wrote, Things I Wish You Knew About Couples Therapy, really, I just sort of talk about some of the myths, the things that I hear from people that I wish I could just sort of like sit down with couples across the country, across the world and say, no, this isn't true. Let me tell you what it's really like. And one of those is the idea that couples therapy is either for couples who are headed for divorce or guaranteed to be, breaking up, where somebody is either ill or, I hate to say it, but crazy. I mean, that's really kind of the word that we typically use, like, oh, his wife's crazy, they should go to therapy. And rarely we talk about couples therapy the way that I think it's most effective, which is as a preventative measure. It's probably the reason that I, was so obsessed with the Kristen Bell, Dax Shepard interview, is because that's really the way that they talk about using therapy. That, and he talks about having been to couples therapy before in previous relationships. At the end, when when he and that ex had already kind of destroyed whatever goodwill and love and fondness had been created, then they go to couples therapy and are sort of like, we'll put it back together. And a lot of times that's really hard work. And for a lot of couples, it doesn't happen, in part because they've already done so much damage to the affection and attachment that existed between them that it's really hard to be willing to make yourself vulnerable, which is a big part of being in couples therapy, and connect with your partner again. And so trying couples therapy, looking at couples therapy as a way of building skills and strengthening your relationship and giving you a leg up on the challenges that will inevitably come, is really kind of, I think, a fresh perspective, but probably the most helpful perspective to have. Couples therapy is not just for solving problems. And the truth is, when you come at a point where things have gotten really nasty and difficult, I genuinely believe with the right couples therapist, a lot of couples can save their relationship. Most couples could probably save their relationship, but it is really hard work. And I have a good number of people who just ultimately decide they don't want to do the work. They don't care enough about the other person or whatever life they've built together to invest in doing that kind of work, of really kind of doing what ends up being much more painful work, because you've developed really nasty habits with one another, where we are less compassionate and we say mean things and we are impatient and we have developed expectations that people are going to leave us or hurt us, that make it really hard when couples come to couples therapy at the beginning, early on, when there's sort of, little things that aren't going well, but we're not screaming at each other every day. Coming at that point is so much easier. The work is easier. It's really just sort of going, wow, let's just let's work on really good habits, good relationship habits. And I think habits when it comes to work and school, but we develop habits everywhere in our lives. We teach kids, hopefully, we teach kids how to study, to develop good study skills, habits. Well, we don't wait until you're a freshman in college, or at least we hope we don't, to develop good study skill habits, because you are going to be drowning before you can perfect those skills. You will have, flunked your semester, because there's so much work to do. There's so much studying to do. And it's often that way in a relationship. If you wait until things are really hard, then it's just more work. It's more challenging. You make more mistakes, and every mistake is more costly when you've been married for 5 years and have a couple of kids, versus if you've been dating for a year and are thinking about getting engaged. It's okay to make some mistakes at that point, because it's as detrimental to the rest of your life if you make a mistake and then learn how to fix it. And so for me, understanding that couples therapy is not a place of last resort, but ought to be a place, it ought to be your first pit stop, do the maintenance on the relationship so that you don't have to overhaul things later on down the road. One of the other myths that I hear quite a bit, well, I shouldn't say I hear it, but that I see quite a bit, and certainly I have a professional bias. I spent lots of time and money in grad school and in residency, to develop my skill, to really specialize very specifically in working with couples and with relationships. That is a really unique niche. And so I certainly have a professional bias where it comes to how do you choose who to help you with your relationship. But I think it's important, and I think a lot of excellent, amazing individual therapists would say the same thing that I'm going to say, which is that working with couples requires more than some just working knowledge of relationships or the skills you need in a relationship. It really is a very specialized kind of work. And so everybody with relationship expertise is not really well suited to help you solve major issues or develop a solid foundation. We need to be sort of thoughtful. And that's not to say that there aren't individual therapists or pastors or relationship coaches out there who didn't necessarily go to grad school to study marriage and family therapy like I did, but who may have, for over the course of their expertise, they have done the research, they have worked with couples, they stay on top of the latest readings, they are very engaged and specializing in working with a relationship instead of just two people in the room. Those are excellent resources to have. But I think it's important to understand that just because someone else has a good marriage or looks like they have a good marriage or has dated a lot, expert, and certainly does not make them an expert in your relationship. So I think it's important to be thoughtful, which really leads us to kind of how do you do that? How do you pick a therapist? Generally speaking, and certainly how do you pick a couples therapist? Because it's that much trickier, I think. So my advice to everybody is interview. Try a therapist on for size. And, the first session or two isn't always going to feel great. It can be an awkward process. It's, for some people, they come in and they're ready. You want to share all the details and it feels great. For most of us, or for a lot of us, it's a little uncomfortable. You're not sure where to start your story. What do I say? You're not sure what to expect. But I think after the first two sessions, if you still feel really awkward or uncomfortable or questioning whether this person understands not just you as an individual, but your partner and your relationship history or your relationship goals, then it's perfectly okay to try another therapist. If you've had a couples therapist and you feel like it didn't help, go find another one. Couples therapy is not the problem. It just might not have been. Sometimes it's not a good fit because that person is just really a expert. Sometimes it's not a good fit just because your personalities don't mesh. And that's a valuable and reasonable criteria to use in picking the right therapist for you, be it a couples therapist or otherwise. And I think sometimes we feel like, well, it's not a personal relationship. We're not going to be best friends. Who cares if I like them? But much like your doctor, it does matter if you like them. Really, like anybody else that you hire to help you with anything. Liking them is part of what allows you to work well together. And so I think it's really crucial to not discount the value of making sure that you are a good personality fit just as much as they are a good professional fit. That does not mean they need to be your best friend. They should not be trying to be your best friend. That's a problem. That's a red flag for sure. But you should feel comfortable. You should feel like they are invested in your goals, not what they think your relationship should look like, but they really want to know what you're looking for, and that they bring some expertise to the table, that it feels like they're listening to you and your partner, and there's some balance. And I always tell couples, sometimes you need a couple sessions to feel balance. So one person really needs more space to talk, and a good therapist will see that and will allow for that, but will also make sure that there's a balance going forward. And so, I certainly have had sessions where, maybe a wife, feels like I'm giving a lot of space to her husband to really talk about his concerns and his, and the inclination maybe to defend oneself. But sometimes that's necessary to hear that stuff. And part of the process is sometimes to have your therapist help you to hear that stuff from your partner, and feel like you can trust the therapist to make sure that in the next session, or maybe, a month later, when you really need the space to be heard, that you're going to get that they're going to ensure that you get the things that you need in the process as well. So those are some of the tips. I also, one of the things that a lot of people don't do, but I wish they would do more of, is ask. Don't be afraid to ask your friends, your family, your coworkers, post it on Facebook. My colleagues and I would not be in business if only a few of you were going to therapy. People use therapy, and it is unfortunate to me that sometimes we still hide behind this stigma that it is somehow negative or a weakness to need help. We're not embarrassed to say that we've hired a personal trainer, or that we went to the doctor because we had the flu, or if I hire a plumber to fix my sink. In so many other areas of our life, we have accepted that we can't always be the expert. And unfortunately, our relationships is a place where we don't always feel comfortable making that publicly known. But the truth is that lots of people have experience with therapy. Lots of people have gone to couples therapy, or gone to workshops, or gone to retreats, and met really great relationship experts that they would be happy to share with you if you can be brave enough to sort of put yourself out there and ask, and say you're thinking about, and do they know anybody? Because often that's the best way to find a really good couples therapist. You get some feedback, and that's really important. Confidentiality means that, as therapists, we don't do a lot of self-promotion. I'm never going to sort of post a video about how great I am. Hopefully they would want to say that, but who knows? Because their work is private. It's theirs to decide if they want to share or not share. But if you ask friends and family, I think that you'll be surprised to find how many people have things to share with you. So I definitely would encourage you to consider trying to find a referral through your social network. Be that, it doesn't necessarily need to be online. It can simply be in your neighborhood or in a church group, and just asking those questions, because a lot of times that's the best place to find a resource. One of the myths that I think is super important for us to talk about is the idea that your problems aren't big enough for couples therapy. A lot of times, I think, because people know this is what I do, this is my area of expertise, we'll sort of say, what? We'll figure it out. It's not a big deal. Like, he's not cheating on me, or we're not, on the brink of divorce. And back to what I was there. You don't need to wait for major crisis in a relationship to take the time to find a really excellent couples therapist. I think that's kind of a mistake, to be honest. I think it's really important if you feel like we could use a little help here. Therapy is better than the gym. At the gym, they want you to sign like a year or 2-year contract, and whether you come every month or not, they're taking their money. A good couples therapist just wants to see you when you feel like you could use their help. And that doesn't require you to make a commitment to say, like, if we come for 3 sessions to sort through our disagreement about why, you don't have to keep coming. You could come and just have that as a safe place to talk about, can we have this conversation without yelling and arguing and fighting with each other? Could somebody help us to see maybe where we can compromise in a way that's effective that we haven't been able to figure out? And sometimes that takes 1 session, 2 sessions, 5 sessions, and then you're done and you can leave. And, I tell clients all the time, like, whenever you decide that you're finished, you can be finished. And if 6 months later, a year later, 3 years later, you feel like, something else has come up and I could use a little help again, I'll be here. And I think that that's how most other couples therapists feel. We're here. Our job is to help you when you need our help. Be that providing a really neutral place to have difficult conversations, be that teaching you better skills to resolve conflict or improve communication, figuring out what's going on. Maybe, intimacy isn't what it used to be, and you want to be able to talk about that, and you're not sure how to broach the subject. Couples therapy is a perfect place for that. That's the place where you get an expert who goes, guess what? You're not alone in this. Millions of other couples are struggling with this issue. So let's understand what's happening for you guys, and let's come up with some solutions. Let's come up with a way for it to be better. And so I think understanding, really challenging that idea that whatever's happening in your relationship doesn't warrant couples therapy, I think can be a really big step. So I definitely encourage you to do that. So we've talked about some of the myths. What gets in the, I want to talk a little bit about what gets in the way, what prevents us. Okay, now I know what couples therapy is about. Esther's told me how to go about finding a couples therapist that I like, and to that end, I will post some links to some, really what I think are really reputable directories that you can look into for some additional resources if you're looking for a therapist right now. What else stops people from really reaping the benefits? And I think sometimes what stops us is knowing how to make use of the time, not knowing what to talk about. And I think the number one thing is come into therapy ready to be open and honest and vulnerable. And that's hard. I know it's hard. It's hard for all of us when we're, fighting or bickering with somebody we love. It's hard to get vulnerable with them. It's hard to sort of put our guard down. But when you can go into the therapy room and be really honest, that makes a huge difference. It really does. So learning how to be honest, learning how to be open, not being afraid to say, your therapist's job is not to judge you. It's, I hear a lot of stuff, and the truth of the matter is, as hard as it may be believed, I don't think to myself, oh my goodness, what a terrible wife she is, or what a terrible boyfriend he is. I think sometimes this feels really hard, or it makes me sad for this person, or it makes me, angry or frustrated that, they are having such a hard time. But, part of doing this work, I think, as a therapist and feeling called to it is really learning to stay in a space that is fairly non-judgmental. Your life, it's not my life. So it's not mine to place my values on. And I think that's a really important thing to know coming in the room, is that I want to understand. And I think as couples therapists, we all want to understand what is valuable in your life. What are your priorities? What are the values and the principles that you choose to live by? Because those become the guideposts for how I help you. To help you have the marriage that I would want. I'm here to help you to have the marriage or the relationship that you want. And so it really is about, that's part of the professional work is learning how to check some of my stuff at the door. And having that balance between really understanding, the value I bring to the therapy room is that everybody is worthwhile and worthy of love and respect. And so if I see partners not giving each other compassion or respect, I am going to challenge that. And I think that's important, because I think those are basic human rights that need to happen. But what you choose to do I choose to forgive a cheating boyfriend or spouse, or do I choose to leave? I don't have a value. There's no value judgment on that. The work of a good couples therapist is to help you sort through what feels right for you. And that goes really across the board in terms of all the various decisions you make about how you want to live your life and your lifestyle. So, if you ever feel like the couples therapist you've chosen is judging you or is pushing you in a direction that doesn't feel like it's in line with who you are or what you have said that you wanted, then it's important to have that conversation, to feel empowered to say, well, wait a minute. This is what I want. This is what I believe in. And I feel like you are encouraging me in a different direction, and see what happens. And if that conversation with your therapist doesn't go well, then it may be time for you to think about somebody else who maybe is a little more comfortable helping you with your goals rather than imposing their own. I am thankful that I have amazing colleagues, not just in my practice, but across the country. That I I personally believe that there are many more fantastic couples to count on than there are those who maybe are struggling. So definitely put yourself. So we've talked about what to do when we get there, but how do you get there? Which is probably the third most common question I get, is my husband will never go to therapy. And I have to confess that while I hear it quite a bit from women, I think it goes both ways. I just had a conversation not too long ago with a husband who really wanted to go to therapy, really felt like their relationship was in trouble, and was really struggling with how to present that option to his wife and to get her to be on board with that as something that they should do that would help them. So I actually have a little YouTube video on Group Therapy Associates YouTube channel, which is my private practice, talking about sort of my secret trick for getting your partner into therapy. So here's the secret. Just ask. So often I hear that from people and then I find out that they didn't ask. And in the middle of a fight going, well, you better go to couples therapy or I'm leaving. That's not asking. Asking is creating an invitation, is saying to your partner, I'm worried about where our relationship is headed. I love you. I'm committed to you. I want to stay together. I want to make this life that we are building or this relationship we're trying to build. I want to make it work. It's saying essentially, at the beginning of the hour, I was saying, Dax Shepard said, whatever happens, I'm not going to break up with you. Or I don't want to break up with you, but we've got to figure out how to make certain things work for us. And being willing to say, it is a problem. I want to go to couples therapy because I want to work so I can be a better partner. And it's hard if you are in a relationship with somebody who loves you and is invested and values your relationship. If you can come to them and say, listen, I think that this is a process that will help me become a better wife, girlfriend, husband, boyfriend, partner, whatever term you like to use for you, then it's hard to say no to that. It's easy to become defensive when somebody says, well, I think we need couples therapy, and gives you that eye, it's all you. You're the main problem here. I'm fine, but let's go to couples therapy. So, well, I would be defensive. Totally open to couples therapy, and I think that's how we present the option. It doesn't come up until we're in the midst of an argument, and it doesn't have to be a volatile argument. Sometimes it's that lull after some sort of moment of dislike, our last ditch chance to make it work, rather than saying, you know what, I feel like we're headed in the wrong direction. I want our sex life to be better. I want our communication to be better. I want us to fight less often. Whatever is happening, I wish was different. Just bring it up, because more often than not, if we're equally committed as we are to them and us to be better, they are typically willing to go ahead and at least give it a shot, at least give it a try. See video, and you can share the article. What do we hope to get out of couples therapy? Because I think that's the other piece is, if you have a conversation before you, and when that happens, that can be a useful goal. And sometimes your goal in couples therapy is not so clear cut. Sometimes it's something like, this just feels off. or I just feel disconnected, or I don't feel love the way I used to, and or I don't know what's wrong. That's a good enough reason to come in. I know something's wrong, but I don't know what's wrong, and I don't really know how I want to solve it or what the right answer is, but I want a place to figure that out. And that's a legitimate goal to have, to go to therapy. But I think it's helpful as partners to talk about that, to sort of go in so that you both have an understanding of what would help you to know that being in therapy has become productive. You have a sort of a touch point of saying, well, what are we, and that would be the thing to check in on, like, okay, do we feel closer to at least understanding what's not working for us? Or do we feel closer to understanding can better support each other or have more fun together? And I think that's the thing I'm going to sort of end on tonight, which is, now that we've talked for like 45 minutes about all the work that goes into being in a relationship, and the value of couples therapy and helping to do that work and make it productive and create fulfilling, satisfying relationships, I want to talk a little bit about, have fun. That is kind of key for your relationship. And while couples therapy is, obviously I've spent 45 minutes telling you, like, it's totally what you got to get into. It's really great. But one of the questions that I was sent this week in preparation for tonight's chat from one, I was going to say viewer, because she's not watching right now. I guess viewer. One of the questions I got was, so often I read these self-help books, and I'm gonna actually read her question. So, hey, Esther, I read a lot of self-help books and articles, and in all of them, there's all these exercises and homework and a lot of talk about the work of making your relationship happy. But what about the fun? I feel like sometimes we're working hard and not really enjoying ourselves. Great question. I love that. And I feel like it's the perfect place for us to end tonight, because I want to let's end on a high note. It's totally true. There is so much stuff out there. I am just as much a part of this sort of like relationship work, discussion as any other therapist, expert, writer, researcher, because it does take effort. Everything in life takes effort. Everything worth having in life takes effort. I firmly believe that. But relationships are still meant to be fun. We're meant to really enjoy each other, like have a good time and laugh and be silly. And we just have to be intentional about that. Just the same way that you're intentional about picking up a self-help book or reading an article on, 5 ways to better communication or 3 bad habits to avoid in your relationship. You also have to be intentional about saying, oh my goodness, let's go look at this museum exhibit. Let's go to the community picnic. Furious 7 is out. Let's go check that out. That's on my to-do list. Maybe that's not on everyone else's to-do list. But become intentional about creating fun and enjoyment in your relationship, just as you need to be intentional about working on the things that get broken or that get stuck or are difficult. And so one of the things that I like to do, and in my practice, is to create fun events that are sort of like secretly working on our relationship too. So, and I think that I certainly am not alone in wanting to create those kinds of events. I see all kinds of couples events out there, retreats, and there are retreats that are very intense about really working on your relationship. And there are retreats that are just designed for couples to come and like get away. And maybe there's like a workshop or a luncheon, but it's mostly about sort of getting away and being alone together. Those are really fun things to do that, include particularly if your relationship is in a place where you feel like there are some issues that you want to work out, but also create an atmosphere of fun and engagement and sort of bring that playful spark back to your relationship. So I want to offer everybody the last link I'm going to post on my kitchen conversation page is going to be for a special discount. Speaking of creating fun and working on a relationship, to our upcoming couples one. My practice, Group Therapy Associates, hosts an event series called Conversations Off the Couch. Conversations Off the couch is essentially us taking common topics that happen on the therapy couch, so to speak, and taking them off the couch, out of the therapy office, into fun settings where it can be fun and social and playful and silly and all the things I'm talking about, while still working on something that we already know is really important to a lot of people because we hear about it in our office. So coming up on June 6th, at the winery at LaGrange out here in Haymarket is going to be our first couples lunch, which is called Communication is Not Your Problem. So you got to come out to the lunch. It'll be a lunch and wine tasting, and they make a phenomenal sangria if you're into that kind of stuff. And we will have really an intimate, it's an intimate lunch for a small number of couples, along with 2 relationship experts, including myself. And we're just going to talk about, sort of real life, like what's it really like to be in a relationship. If you're a reader of my blog, you know that I every month I post a real love blog post series featuring real couples, and we're going to sort of bring some of that flavor to this luncheon as well, where we're going to talk about, what are the things, what's happening in your relationship right now, and get really practical, useful advice. This is not an opportunity, not that there's anything wrong with this. I do this kind of work myself, but this is not a sort of like, tell me about your childhood and let's try it out event. This is we cannot stop bickering about finances. Give us a quick practical tool that we can use tonight that will change the way we have this conversation. So that's the kind of stuff you're going to be able to get at this lunch. These food and winery at LaGrange is beautiful. So it's an opportunity to combine sort of your date night, your weekend date, with some relationship work, with some fabulous food and wine, with really awesome couples and really awesome relationship experts. Well, I think I'm pretty awesome. So hopefully you think I'm awesome and we'll come out and we'll have a good time. So be sure to head over to estherboykin.com/kitchen conversations, and you will see links to the videos and articles and interviews I've talked about over the last hour. And at the very bottom, you will see a link to, there will be a ticket form. You need to make sure you use that exact ticket form, just your seat, so that you can get sort of my VIP pricing for this event. Ends on May 4th, but if you pop over to estherboykin.com, kitchen conversations, you can get, you're going to get a deal. You're going to get even discounts on top of early bird discounts. So definitely, if you're in the DC metro area, check it out. I think it's going to be a beautiful event at a beautiful venue, and more importantly, it's going to be a lot of fun and a really great way to strengthen your connection, talk about communication, and frankly, get a little free access to some therapists. If you've ever considered maybe couples therapy, or you're considering it now that we've done it in this light as more of a preventative tool as opposed to a crisis management tool, then I would definitely say communication is not your problem. Couples luncheon is a great opportunity to just chat a little bit and get a feel for what's it like talking with a therapist. Certainly it's not therapy. It's not going to be one-on-one, but it is a small group, and I think a really great opportunity for any couple who's looking for a fun way to just work on the connection, work on the intimacy, because who doesn't want better love in their life? So thank you for checking me out. I have a great time doing this. I'm super excited about next month's kitchen conversation. I'm planning big announcements coming up in May. So definitely check it out. And time between now and the end of May, when we do our next one, visit me on the blog, again, estherboykin.com/kitchen conversations. You can also find me all over social media. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Esther B MFT. You can find me on Google+, and on Facebook you can check out Conversations Off the Couch, and you can also check out Group Therapy Associates. If you're interested in booking a therapy or coaching appointment, definitely head over to grouptherapyassociates.com, because that's where I do all my work. That's where you get all the booking information and can get access to my calendar and my schedule. So I look forward to connecting with you in all of those various places, and hopefully seeing a couple of you in June at our couples lunch. Thanks again for joining me, and don't forget to hop back over to estherboykin.com so that you can check out all the resources we talked about tonight. Have a great night.